story of the daughters of Tzalafchad that we read in Parashat Pinchas, the 4 daughters of Tzalafchad approached Moshe Rabbeinu and explained to him that their father passed away with no sons and stood to lose his portion in the land of Israel since he had no heirs. And they explained to Moshe that it doesn't really make sense that just because someone dies without any sons, that he loses his portion in the land of Israel. And they asked that they, the daughters of Tzalafchad, be allowed to inherit the portion that would have gone to their father in the land of Israel. Moshe does not know what to do. He asks God, and God explains that the daughters of Tzalafchad are correct, and that if in the instance where someone passes away with daughters and no sons, that those daughters will inherit. Now, the way that the daughters of Tzalafchad open up their request to Moshe Rabbeinu is very strange. They say, Avinu meit bamidbar, v'hu lo haya, betoch haida hanoadim al Adonai ba'adat Korach, ki v'chet'o meit uvanim lo hayu lo. That our father passed away in the desert. He was not among the followers of Korach. Rather, he died of his own sin. Now, this is a little strange. Why is it important to explain why their father died? Now, Tosfot and the Gemara and Baba Batra and Daf Kuf Yud Tet Amud Bet explain that Tzalafchad, their father, was really the Mikoshe Shetzim, who we read about earlier in Bamidbar, who went out on Shabbos. He gathered wood in violation of Shabbos and was subsequently put to death. Now, these two stories of the Mikoshe Shetzim and the daughters of Tzalafchad are similar in that in both instances, Moshe Rabbeinu was unsure how to proceed, and he asked God for further instruction. But Tosfot add a very important background point to the story of the Mikoshe Shetzim. Tosfot say that Tzalafchad gathered the wood and for a very specific purpose, that he was worried about the Jewish people who had just undergone the sin of Meraglim, in which God had told them they were not going to enter the land of Israel, only their children would. And Tzalafchad was worried that the Jewish people would conclude that since God didn't bring them to the land of Israel, that they did not have to follow any of God's commands. And so in order to demonstrate that that was not the case, Tzalafchad went out, violated one of God's commands, violated Shabbos, was subsequently put to death, and that was a demonstration that the halachot still apply, that the mitzvot still apply, and the Jews still are required to serve God, despite the fact that that generation was not going to make it into the land of Israel. And this really draws a very sharp contrast between Korach and Tzalafchad, because whereas Tzalafchad understood that the relationship between the Jewish people and God is not transactional and does not depend on what God does or doesn't give the Jewish people, that regardless of anything that's going on, the Jewish people have to serve God. Korach tried to use the service of God for selfish reasons and to try to gain his own personal power and authority. And by opening up their request to Moshe Rabbeinu, by drawing a contrast between Tzalafchad and Korach, the daughters of Tzalafchad were indicating to Moshe Rabbeinu that their desire for a portion of the land of Israel wasn't just for selfish reasons, that they understood that the importance of Eretz Yisrael in the context of the Jewish people being Ovdei Hashem, and so that their desires really were pure. And what's remarkable about the statement of Benot Tzalafchad is how they responded to what their father did, because it would be very reasonable to be embarrassed and ashamed of their father, who went out and publicly violated Shabbos and was publicly executed. And even if they had the guts to go up to Moshe Rabbeinu and ask to inherit the portion that would have gone to their father in the land of Israel, it would have been very reasonable for them to omit the fact that their father was involved in such a debacle. But what Benot Tzalafchad did was they understood what their father stood for, and they internalized his values. They turned what could have been a very deep source of shame and embarrassment, and turned it into the source of their love and devotion to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which ultimately led to an entirely new aspect of the laws of inheritance being introduced in the Torah on their account.